Hi 5A and 5B. I'm really annoyed. I just did this whole video and then my computer somehow corrupted the file and now I have to redo this whole lesson. I'm really annoyed. But anyway, be cool, be calm. Let's hope it works this time. Alright, I'm going to talk today about Brave New World. Wonderful Brave New World. So that's pages 177 to 179 in your Rhyme and Reason. If you did not bring the book home, you'll find a scan copy, PDF copy of this on Moodle for you to access. We're going to have a bit of a read of it today and go through it. Once again, for some reason, the Rhyme and Reason book has chosen an excerpt from towards the end of the novel, and like most dystopian fiction, this book has a lot of words and phrases and concepts that are totally unique to this book and this world and this concept, and so it's really difficult to sort of just dive into this excerpt and understand what's happening. So I'm going to read to you all of what's on page 177, this introduction which compares Brave New World with 1984, and as it goes try and explain some of the concepts in the world and the plot to give you a sense of exactly what's going on. If we have time, I'm going to do also a lesson about the opening of chapters of Brave New World, so chapters 1 and 2. Before I left school, I scanned, I actually photocopied 58 copies of it as well, which I'll never use now, but anyway, I scanned for you chapters 1 and 2 of Brave New World because I was going to do a lesson on that with you in class just to help you understand this excerpt. There wouldn't be any questions in the test from chapters 1 or 2, but I would use it to give you some more, to help you understand what's in this part of the PTR, of the Rhyme and Reason book. So we'll do that next week if we have time. Okay, so I'm going to be reading to you now from the top of page 177, and as per usual, I will stop and ramble when the feeling takes me. Okay. By writing his book, Huxley did not want to predict the future. The theme of Brave New World, he wrote later, is not the advancement of science as such, it is the advancement of science as it affects human individuals. The aim of the book, then, was to describe a possible future world in order to prevent the present one from becoming like it. And now, some 60 years after it was first published, it is worth asking ourselves whether or not he succeeded. Judging by the title only, we might be tempted to conclude that Orwell's 1984 is now a dated book. But the year must not be taken too literally. Orwell might just as well have chosen 2084, and a few chapters will suffice to convince us that the book has lost none of its attractions merely because the date in the title has passed. Orwell's world differs from Huxley. Coffee break. Orwell's world differs from Huxley's in that science does not play an important part. There are few things, if any, that would be technically impossible nowadays. I already said that to you about 1984. 1984 is more about how you can use psychological and physical torture to control people and to gain and maintain power by controlling memory, controlling history, and that's sort of more of the focus. So there's nothing in 1984 that isn't possible these days. Instead, the book concentrates on the uses and abuses of power, and on the organization and psychology of power. And perhaps this is the reason why its tone is so radically different from that of Brave New World. While Huxley's book, for all its serious purpose, will occasionally raise a smile, 1984 is chiefly characterized by grimness and brutality, and as the book draws to a close, the reader shares Winston's fear and his sense of utter helplessness. He is left with the firm conviction that this must never happen in reality. It has been suggested that the kind of world Orwell describes will never become real simply because Orwell has warned us and shown us the results of totalitarian thinking. Perhaps this view is rather too optimistic. It is up to us that it remains fiction and no more. True, it's definitely too optimistic. Okay, there's a real contrast between 1984 and Brave New World. They're both about control. They're both about people gaining and governments gaining and maintaining control over individuals. The majority gaining and maintaining control over the lives of individual people. But the way that is done is totally different. 1984 uses pain, torture, the things that we hate to control us, to inflict that control. Whereas Brave New World uses pleasure. It uses things like drugs and sex to maintain control over the population. So there is no question, and as you read this, as you learn more about this world, there's no question that Brave New World, if you had to pick between a future, you would pick Brave New World over 1984, 100 times out of 100 for sure. But Brave New World is still a dystopia because, well, you'll see. Okay. Perfect as the organization of society in Brave New World may seem, even there human error cannot be eliminated completely. One of its products is Bernard Marx, an alpha plus intellectual who, owing to a careless worker having put too much alcohol in the blood surrogate of his bottle before he was born, has become something of a misfit. Okay, so this is why it's really difficult to go from the end, because I have to explain all this stuff. Bernard Marx is one of the main characters. He represents, he's similar, well, he's not really sort of the Winston Smith, that's more John the Savage, but Bernard Marx is a man living in London in this unknown future time who doesn't really fit in. He desperately wants to fit into the society, but he doesn't really fit in. He's an alpha plus. Now, the version of the world we find in Brave New World is one based on a caste system. There are 5 different castes. So there are a historical real caste system in the world. You just need to do some research in the Indian caste system to learn that. And this is a caste system based on 5 different levels: alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon. The 5 different castes. Alpha and beta are at the top. They are alpha is the highest caste, and then beta. As you go higher in the caste system, the people are better looking, the people are taller, and they're more intelligent. As you go further down the caste, the people are smaller, less intelligent, and less good looking. So the epsilons are, like half the height of the alphas or something like that. And these different castes are created in different ways. They're conditioned in different ways. Alpha and beta are created much the same way we are, in the sense of it's one sperm, one egg. Gamma, delta, and epsilons are created using what's called in the book the Bokanovsky process, and that is wherein you take one egg, one fertilized egg, and you divide it over and over again in a sort of similar to how twins are created, but instead of it happening twice or 3 times, it happens like dozens and dozens of times to create many, many, many different identical individuals. And so it's sort of, I guess the idea is that it sort of weakens it, or the people are less intelligent, and then once they're born, and I use born very lightly, they're sort of raised in sort of bottles or pods, much like you might, like sort of like that Matrix idea, right? They're sort of bred, and they are given various things to either strengthen and weaken their intelligence and all that kind of thing before they're born. And then once they're born, they're conditioned through various techniques, which are explained in chapters 1 or 2, to, for example, make epsilons and deltas really dislike nature and dislike art. So they're conditioned to hate that sort of thing. Each one of the 5 castes only hang out with their caste members, and they're conditioned to believe that their caste is the best of each of the 5 castes, the best one for them to be in. Okay, so Bernard Marx is an alpha plus intellectual, so he's sort of one of the highest, as high as you can go when it comes to sort of your position in this caste system. But somebody made a mistake when he was sort of in the womb, or in that process of gestation, and so he's got a sort of strange inability. He's a bit too short. He doesn't really look the way the others do, so he feels like a bit of a misfit. Okay, so, and one way he tries to, is making him more human than he's supposed to be, his conditioning has failed, and he shows many characteristics of the pre-Fordian type of man. Now, in Brave New World, we have a post-religious society, so religion has been erased, and that's because this society believes that things like religion and family are bad, essentially. They do not want the extremes of feeling that things like family and religion create in us. So, for example, if you are a Christian or a Muslim, you have beliefs around sex and sin. And in this society, you are actually encouraged to have sex with as many people as you can, and you're told you're not allowed. There's no such thing as getting married. There's no such thing as falling in love. There's a character in the book who is only dating one man at the start of the story, and her friends actually think there's something wrong with her. Like, why are you just seeing this one guy? You know, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you sort of sleeping around? And so the ideas that we sort of read in the Bible around sin are not. There's no such thing, I guess, as sin in this society in that old sense. And so they replaced God with Ford. Now, you might not know who Henry Ford was. He died, in 1947, and so it's a bit before your time, maybe. But the Ford cars. I'm sure you've heard of the Ford Car Company. He was incredibly wealthy. He's like this sort of stereotypical capitalist American billionaire industrialist type, and he really made that sort of assembly line factory work, like assembling cars in that way. He really developed that idea and took it to America and made it a really big part of the way things work there in the factories. And you see that in the way babies are born. I don't want to say born. It's the wrong word. When you read chapters 1 or 2, sort of the babies are gestating in these sort of bottles, and they're sort of in these rows, and betas go along and put various chemicals in each one to achieve various goals. So they've sort of made the creation of humans a scientific capitalist process, factory farming type thing. And the Matrix owes a bit to Brave New World in that those sort of ideas. Okay, so you see what I mean about this being difficult to sort of dive right to almost to the end of the book, because there's a lot to explain to get to you to help you understand this excerpt. But that's what they've got. So that's all we can do. Okay. It is through him, so through Bernard Marx, that we are introduced to the central character in the book. On holiday in a savage reservation in New Mexico, where primitive life is allowed to continue in the interest of science, he meets a young man called John, whose mother had been left behind in the reservation when it was discovered she was pregnant. Okay, John, also known as the Savage, is the main character in the story. He's the one that really represents us. He has grown up having a mother, having a sort of family, and he taught himself to read by reading Shakespeare, and he really represents sort of the ideals that we hold. And he's highly intelligent, and he is brought back to London by Bernard Marx to sort of experience this world, or this new world order. So there are a few places on Earth that are not controlled by these world controllers, and they are called savage reservations, where a few people are left to sort of live the old primitive way of life. So they sort of keep them there as almost like a scientific experiment, kind of, to sort of observe how people used to live, kind of thing. But John, unlike the other savages in the reservation, his mother was actually a beta, and she went there on a trip and had forgotten to take her birth control and was found to be pregnant, so she was sort of left there by the father. So that's part of the story as well. So, yes. Let's keep reading. Okay, so he meets a young man called John, whose mother blew up. Although he has adapted to the primitive way of life of the Indians in many ways, John has tried to educate himself with the help of the only book he has got, an old copy of the complete works of William Shakespeare. Bernard is fascinated by the thought of a unique experiment. If he can take John back to England with him, he will be able to witness a confrontation between the pre-Fordian and the post-Fordian ways of life. So pre-Fordian, that's us coming into conflict with post-Fordian, so the way people are living in Brave New World with this caste system and sort of complete and utter focus on pleasure and rejection of things like family and marriage and religion. Okay. John's visit to London excites a great deal of curiosity, and everybody wants to see the Savage, as he is called. John, in turn, is utterly amazed by what he sees, and his first reaction provides the book with its title, O Brave New World, that has such people in it, a quotation from Shakespeare's The Tempest. But as its real character becomes clear to him, he is appalled by it. His attacks on the system make him a danger to stability, and when he causes a row, which means to cause a fight, trying to destroy the free rations of soma, a drug that gives feelings of peace and happiness, he is arrested together with Bernard and a poet friend. The three of them are brought before the world controller, Mustafa Mond. Okay, some words to explain there. The free rations of soma. Soma is essentially a replacement for alcohol, so we now drink way too much alcohol, including myself, as you know. And soma is what they consume there in just massive amounts, and it's sort of has the same effect as alcohol, but it doesn't give you a hangover, and everybody uses it to escape any problems. So if you're feeling sad or whatever, all you do is just take this drug, so you don't have to do any feeling of things. Mustafa Mon is, I guess, Brave New World's equivalent to O'Brien in 1984. He is nowhere near as scary as O'Brien because it's a totally different book, but he's he's representative, like O'Brien is, of the ideology of this world order. So he in the excerpt that we're going to read, he has a conversation with the Savage about basically their opposing opinions about how life should be lived, because that's what this is about. These are people that have totally different ideas about what life should look like, and they're about to have a conversation about to try and explore those differences. Okay, I'm going to stop this video now so I don't lose any of it, and then the next part I'm going to start reading the excerpt.